Well, actually, not Zach Lang, but we're going to be doing a second edition of State of the Nation coming up later this afternoon to kind of recap things and keep an eye on all the news that's going to be pouring in because this has been a frenzy. Like it lived up to the name this year. We're only 30 minutes, 33 minutes into this thing, and we have seen a lot. We're going to talk Hyman. We're going to talk Barrie. We're going to talk about the Ethan Bear deal. Dan wearing a very fitting shirt for this one while Josh and I are matching. Cody Ceci, that deal just got done apparently. Warren Foegele is the newest member of the forward core for the Edmonton Oilers as well. But whether it's Oilers or not, let's just go around the horn here. What's the most surprising move that you've seen so far today in free agent frenzy? Dan?
For me, it's the trade for Ethan Bear. It's not so much the player because I think that everybody is enjoying the player in Warren Foegele, but the return for Ethan Bear is disappointing for me, and also for Ethan Bear to go to Carolina around their recent rumor signings. It's just, I don't know, it just sucks.
Josh, we're gonna dig into it a little bit more. Josh, most surprising move for you?
Most surprising move for me. That's a good question. I'm fired up. A lot of good deals. I personally think for the Edmonton Oilers, I think they're a better team now than they were 24 hours ago. I'm going to say biggest surprising deal. And Ty, you and I were talking about it before we went live here. David Savard going to Montreal and taking what seemingly is a ticket that's not that much more expensive than, Cody Ceci coming to Edmonton. So I think that David Savard deal is kind of a shock. Also, Laurent Brossoit getting $2 million in Vegas, right? That's where he went?
Yeah, he got like 2.3 million per year in Vegas. I mean,
wow.
I like Brossoit, don't get me wrong, but with the goaltending market the way it is, that's not exactly a guy who I'm giving 2.3 million to. So I was really surprised with the Brossoit deal. I was surprised that Savard got as little as he did. And also, I mean, last year we had like a market correction, right? Like we had all those kind of bigger name free agents or guys that in normal years would really cash in, and they didn't. And this year, it feels like things are back to normal around the NHL a little bit.
Yep.
And veteran defensemen are just getting paid like crazy. I mean, Savard came in lower. I think that might have been a hometown discount thing with the Canadians. But Ceci getting $3.25 million from the Oilers, that's more than I thought he would have been getting. Forbort got 3 years by $3 million. Tucker Poolman, who's played like 100 NHL games, he's got $2.5 million per year. Hamonic got $3 million per year. For me, the run on veteran defenseman is stunning. Dan, what's up?
Kevin Weeks just announcing that Ryan Getzlaf will stay in Orange County for one more year with the Anaheim Ducks.
Damn.
That's too bad. I wanted him to come to Edmonton.
That is honestly really too bad.
It's not done, but Kevin Weeks is saying that it sounds.
I trust Kevin Weeks, unfortunately.
Yep.
Yeah, Weeks is about as good as they come as an insider. That is really.
That's too bad. I thought he'd be a good fit on the third line, especially with Warren Foegele coming to Edmonton. I thought, if you can get a gritty but also somewhat skilled third line going with Getzlaf and Foegele, I thought that would have been a good fit. That's too bad. Unfortunate, but there's still other names out there available potentially as a third line center, Ty.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Frank Saravalli's list right now over at dailyfaceoff.com with Getzlaf off the board. He was 16. A guy like Philippe Deneau is just going to cost too much. He's the highest center still available on Frank's list. So if Getzlaf's going back to Anaheim, Alex Wenberg got a nice contract today with the Seattle Kraken. I'm just literally going to read off the centerman here. Paul Stastny's staying put in Winnipeg on a one-year deal. Krejci's going to stay in Boston. Glendenning's gone to Dallas. I was stunned that Glendening didn't end up in Edmonton. I thought Ken Holland would have for sure went and got his guy.
Yeah.
Benino's gone to San Jose apparently. Corrali's going to Columbus. So it's Eric Holla at 44 as an option. Tyler Bozak, Casey Cizikas. That's kind of it. That's the list right there. And they have a clear need for a third line center. So one of those guys is going to have to be who Ken Holland goes out and gets.
If the Oilers don't get a third line center, is this essentially saying that you think that Ryan McLeod has shown enough to fill that void for the Edmonton Oilers? Or would that be a miss? Would you consider that a miss if you start the season as Ryan McLeod?
It's a miss if you don't get a centerman. But in that scenario, like let's say they miss on those few guys I just kind of rattled off, and you don't, if you're going to go McLeod, maybe you circle back to bring in Jujhar Khaira into the mix again.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he would sign, if he is looking for a fresh start, but that's kind of what you're looking at that point. Or you're going and making a trade somewhere. But, I mean, what team is just going to kind of give you a third-line center, right? The Oilers don't have a ton of assets or a ton of cap space anymore. So I'm not sure. Is that the biggest need still for this team then, in your guys' opinion?
No.
They also need a goalie, right, Dan?
That's the number one need for
probably
me.
a goalie.
It continues to be the goalie, and we're starting to see goalies trickling through the wire there. Frank, I think, said that the goalie situation is pretty fluid as it is right now. I think we have to wait for the big names to drop before we see a lot of the other ones go. But as you mentioned, Josh Brossoit in Vegas, Brian Elliott signed in Tampa for a short-term deal. So some of the lower end guys of the free agent goalies are off the market already, but we'll see what the Oilers can do with a goalie. It is an absolute need to me, especially with the downgrade on defense that you've seen in some positions and in some of those spots. Goaltending is number one.
Just looking here at the Twitch chat. Once again, we are live on Oilers Nation, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube, so you can follow along. Dangerous Wade, did Dan not get the matching t-shirt memo? No, he did not. He's supporting our boy Ethan Bear right now. Rye says just simply pain, and I feel like that's how a lot of Oilers fans are feeling here. S. Simons 94 says Glendening not coming tells me Holland's running a fourth line with McLeod, still looking for a third line center. And I think that might be it. Maybe he just wants to aim a little bit higher than a guy like Glendening, but as I just rattled off, there's not a lot of options out there. Like Getzlaf, I think, might have been a player they were really, really holding out and hoping for. And Gene Principe reported today that they did have, or they were going to have a conversation with Getzlaf's camp, but clearly Getzlaf didn't really want to uproot his family and his life and move away from the Anaheim Ducks. So a bit of a miss there. Let's talk about what the Oilers did do and the Ethan Bear deal specifically. Dan, you mentioned you're disappointed. I think we all are. I think that's a guy who it would have been nice to have him as a career Oiler for so many reasons. I think culturally he's important to this market. He has a lot of fans. A good young right shot defenseman that you drafted in sort of the later rounds. Like, it's very rare that an organization could do that, and to move it for a guy like Warren Foegele, who I like him. Penalty killer, good at 5-on-5, brings some size, brings some grit. He generates a ton of high danger chances, or at least he did in his time with the Hurricanes. Finishing is a bit of an issue, but the bottom line is Warren Foegele's a guy who you could probably replace in free agency, right? Like, you can find those guys on the market pretty easily, and guys like Ethan Bear are difficult to find on the open market, as we're seeing right now.
Well, and that's especially the point right there, is the value of right-handed defensemen is up. And here we are trading a right-handed defenseman for, and again, you don't want to be sitting here ragging on Foegele because it's not his fault that it's the cost of acquisition, but yeah, it's hard to kind of swallow that pill when you have a good young defenseman. We also love to support a guy like Ethan Bear, and like you said, Tyler, his impact off the ice, not just for Edmonton Oilers fans, but for Indigenous youth, is super important and can't be understated. And I hope that he continues to do well in Carolina. But I'm really looking forward to what Foegele brings to this team and into that bottom six this year, a part of the team where we've really struggled. And I said it today earlier on Twitter. I think this might be our best forward group since the 80s. And it sounds obnoxious to say, but the reality is you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and then you've added all the little pieces that we've added throughout Holland's tenure. The offense is definitely better. Goaltending and defense still need work.
I'm going to say this in regards to the Ethan Bear deal. I love Ethan Bear. I think he was important for the community. I think that, he was a face for the franchise, and I think he brought a lot of great stuff to this team. I might be in the minority that says that I don't mind this deal for the Edmonton Oilers. I don't necessarily think that Ethan Bear was going to be the solution on the right side in the future for this team. I think that he had promising upside, and I think that he has shown things in the past that would make you think that, he could be a guy that, could help, navigate that right side coming in the future. But, and I don't want to harp on one playoff performance, but I think that maybe the trade value for Ethan Bear on the open market wasn't as high as possibly you would think when you're in the Edmonton market. If we sit here and think that we could have got more for Ethan Bear, sure, but if you're Ken Holland and you went out there and you were shopping Ethan Bear, that might have been kind of the market value for him as a guy like Warren Foegele, which we're going to have to live with, and I don't mind the deal. I like Warren Foegele. I think he's going to come to that third line and add a little bit of sandpaper, and I think he's the type of player that the Oilers were missing. And, you know, the addition of Tyson Barrie, re-signing him. You guys know I'm a Barrie guy. I got my boy back.
You're Mr. Barrie,
Tyson Barrie. I'm buying a jersey. So I'm probably in the minority in Edmonton that says that I don't mind this deal for the Oilers, and I'm excited to see what Warren Fogel's going to do. So here we go. I heard that his social media handles start with Fogue Daddy, so that's pretty sick.
My argument to that, Josh, and I hear what you're saying, is just, you know, we said it with the Caleb Jones deal. It doesn't need to happen. If you can't find the right value for him, you don't need to make that transaction. Yeah. We didn't need to sign Cody Ceci in that position. You don't, and even if you do sign Cody Ceci, you don't need to trade Ethan Bear right now. You could have 4 defensemen for the entire summer and see what that value can get you. But
I'll counteract that by saying, what's the added benefit of running 4 defensemen in that situation when you could flip Ethan Bear and have a guy that's going to make a difference on your third line, right?
They were clearly in love with Cody Ceci. Like that, the Bear deal being done today was because they knew they were getting Ceci done. And that's something that was pointed out in the chat. Like, sure, you can say a part of it was, you know, you're moving out Bear and you're bringing in a guy like Ceci, but I would argue, one, the Bear's probably a better defenseman right now, so that's not ideal. Ceci's more expensive and he's older. And again, like just getting Foegele, it's a bottom 6 left winger who kills penalties. And yes, those players can be important for you. And come playoff time, having depth is crucial. But if you're moving a prized young piece like Ethan Bear, who is exactly that, like he already is a top 4 defenseman by most standards. And I know he's had some rough goes.
Is
but
he?
Again, he's played like 2 seasons in the NHL. And in his rookie year, he played like 20 minutes a night. Like I think it's a guy who, you know, in the next couple of years, will be a top 4 defenseman for sure. And I think right now he's already on that line. I just think if you're moving him, you needed to fill a bigger hole than you did. You needed to get a really, really good third line center. You needed to have him in a deal to get a goalie to run with Mike Smith. Like there were just so many ways that they could have gone with that move. And it's just disappointing for them to move him for a bottom 6 left winger. That's just, and I like Foegele. I think if they would have gone out and traded a 3rd round pick for Warren Foegele, I would have been over the moon. Type of guy they need. Absolutely. There's the sound clip that went viral. You know, he drives a pickup truck. He's a good guy. That's what the Carolina broadcast crew said about him at one point last year. But I look at the price they paid. It's similar to the Keith deal. It's similar to giving, you know, a bit of extra money in term to Cody Ceci. Like I like the players they're bringing in, but the asset management by Ken Holland just, it's not up to snuff for me. It's giving an extra year to Mike Smith when a guy like Holtby goes and gets a 1-year deal. I know Smith had a great season, but like 2 years for an old goalie, that concerns me a little bit. It's just the asset management just doesn't jive with me. And the only positive I guess for me is not only positive, sorry. One of the positives for me is that this signals that the organization has a lot of faith in Evan Bouchard going forward, and I hope that that's true. They do.
You know, and Evan, they've kind of, I would imagine they've got Bouchard penciled in as the number 2 defenseman on the right side now, with CC as your 3rd D. So, you know, by the end of the season. So yeah, I mean, and I don't disagree with that assessment. I think Evan Bouchard is a hell of a defenseman. It's just what worries me is their usage of him up until this point hasn't really indicated that they have the same faith that they're now showing with the move. So it's a little confusing on that end.
We are keeping our eye, so that one touched on that earlier. Nothing much else really going on right now. It seems to hit a bit of a lull, which is kind of expected. I mean, all these teams have these backdoor deals like ready to go and ready to announce right when free agency opens at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So now I think we're seeing, you know, the players who were truly undecided might need a few hours or a day to kind of mull over their options a little bit. So 3rd line center, goalie, that's what we're keeping an eye on right now. Let's talk about Zach Hyman. That deal is official. What do we all think of that one? I think, like, as far as free agent additions go, $5.5 million for a guy that scores the way he does and has that style of play, forechecks hard. I know you had to give him term, but I love this deal. I think it's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I think this is the best deal for the Edmonton Oilers. I think that the term is okay. I don't mind him signing on a 7-year deal. And this is exactly the kind of guy the Oilers needed. You know, you see all the reports coming out of Toronto, how much they're going to miss this guy, how he was loved in the city. Teammates loved him. He was probably their most consistent forward over the last 2 or 3 years. And this is a guy that's going to bring you the tangibles on the ice. You know, he has some sandpaper to him. He likes to mix it up. He can score goals. but he's also just a good dude. I've heard great in the locker room. All his teammates love him. So I love this deal. You know, and a highly sought after free agent coming to Edmonton, 5.5, and you're doing this deal for the first 3 or 4 years. This is the win now window for the Edmonton Oilers. This is a deal that you look at for the first 3 to 4 years, and you're like, yeah, we love this deal. Realistically, in the last, 4 years of the deal, is it going to be an okay deal? Sure. Hopefully he's still playing up to that standard. But for the people that are saying, oh, this deal has the potential to be so bad on the back 3 or 4 years, well, why are you saying that? This deal has great value in the first 3 years. And then, okay, what if it's just an okay deal on the back 4 years? We don't even know. We haven't even played 1 year of this deal yet. So let's wait. Let's let this player play out. Potentially the cap could go up in the next 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden this is looking like an even better deal. So I love it. I think this is the type of player the Oilers needed. And I'm excited to see what he can do in the top 6, especially playing with McDavid.
The easy thing for me whenever a trade happens is to look at how the other fan base is reacting to the transaction. Or sorry, I shouldn't say a trade. Obviously, he's a free agent. But when a team loses a player like a Zach Hyman, and you see the fan base just absolutely gutted about it, frustrated with the fact that they now have to replace that player and don't think that they can for the value that they got out of him, those are good arrows for Oiler fans to look forward to. The constant in any kind of transaction you make is you got to wait and see until you see the player play. And a lot of people, I don't think, other than this last year, have been able to watch Zach Hyman quite often, myself included. But everything I've heard about him is, we've got kind of a Brad Marchand light player playing on the wing now for us. And so that's not a bad player to add to your team. And to me, he helps our offense play offense more because he's that more defensive minded player with the ability to punch the puck in the net. Our power play gets better. Just everything is good about this signing. And you're right, Josh. Stop worrying about year 5 and 6 of any deal, because this is now the time to compete. And whether you agree or disagree with it, this is the Edmonton Oilers that we have to cheer for this year, and I'm hoping that the transactions and the changes that we've made are able to help us do that.
Looking at the Twitch chat here, an interesting idea brought up by Koskinen Memes, who talked about potentially trading Koskinen in today, tossing in a guy like Benson, getting that deal done. We're going to have another State of the Nation later on this afternoon. We're also going to have a new episode of Oilers Nation Radio dropping on the network later today as well. Things we're expecting to happen. Maybe some movement on the goaltending front for the Edmonton Oilers. Maybe a third-line center, and I want to go there quickly. What about the idea of just adding another winger and running McDavid, Nugent-Hopkins, and Draisaitl? I mean, not in that order to go McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent-Hopkins, but you know what I mean. Running them as your 3 centers. I mean, if you have a guy like Foegele on the left side who you think has some upside as, maybe a really good top 9 player, and if you have him and you have Hyman, what if you can go out and get another left winger somewhere and you can run 3 really good centers? Do you guys like that idea at all?
Well, Tyler, I think the argument for that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to get a better winger at, let's say, $4 million than you would at center, right? You're going to get.
What if you got Nick Foligno?
Yeah, if you got Nick
He's been
Foligno.
connected to the Oilers.
Yeah. Well, are you sure he was actually connected to the Oilers? Because that one tweet came from a fake account. So
Michael Russo, who's the top-notch reporter in Minnesota, said that he expects Foligno to get an offer or have a conversation with the Oilers, and I think Spec had it as well.
Okay, perfect. Then that's true. Yeah, if you can add Nick Foligno at a decent deal, I think that would allow you the opportunity to run the big 3 up the middle, and I think that there could be an added benefit to that. Do you want to have $5 million in your third line? I don't know, but also, okay, whatever. If you have $5 million in your third line and that's giving you 3 deep lines up front, whatever, do that. I think there would be a benefit to adding another winger. And I think Foligno could potentially be a fit. Yeah, especially I could see him playing with McDavid, but I don't know. Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the foot speed is the issue. And I think that's been kind of an issue for this team when we bring in free agents. We either bring in free agents that are all foot speed or no foot speed. and it hasn't really jived with the team otherwise. I think back to Tobias Reeder as a guy that, you know, we had a lot of faith in, and he had the wheels, but just didn't have the skill to back that up. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking when Getzlaf went, is that it's, you know, we're starting to now have to pivot and change our thinking. The dream has always been to have 3 scoring lines and roll with that. As a fan, I don't know if that's a Dave Tippett style of play, but you know, if we're forced to play that way, it's not the worst thing in the world to have that as an option now. If you bring in that second line left winger to play in that position, then slide Nuge down between Cassian and Foegele.
Jonathan Bernier going to the New Jersey Devils. It's a 2-year deal, $4.125 million
He
per
got paid.
season. Yeah, that guy's getting paid after going through a season with the Detroit Red Wings. So a nice deal for Jonathan Bernier. Just quickly, we have a couple more minutes left in this one. Keith Gretzky 98, likely not the real Keith Gretzky, but he's in our Twitch chat. Is the Pius Suter / Nick Ritchie dream dead now with the Foegele acquisition? And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, Suter would be interesting as a guy who could play center or the wing. I think Nick Ritchie, not qualified by Boston, so he is an unrestricted free agent. That would be just unreal. I think he would be a great fit. Big body, throw him in your bottom 6. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, if you add a winger, I think it can be a left winger or a right winger. You know, a guy like Ritchie, maybe it bumps Yamo down the lineup a little bit and just helps you build a top 9 that can really sort of outscore what might be a problem in terms of your defense. Like, just outscore your problems. Take the over every night, boys, 82 times next year. But I love the idea of Nick Ritchie, a guy like Pius Suter, centerman who can play the wing. Another name that I'd keep an eye on, and I think the Oilers have been connected to him a little bit before, is a guy like Matthias Janmark. But maybe you go out and you get a centerman who can play the wing, and you just build a bunch of flexibility in your top 9.
The old Team Canada build, as they would say.
Just get a bunch of good players, right? And
Yep.
say, screw it, we'll deal
Sick
with the
players.
positions when we need to deal with it.
Sign the best player available.
Always BPA, drafting BPA.
Shift it to the free agency day. It's been a wild day. I just wanted to cover some things like Jordan Martinook, who had been rumored to come here, has re-signed with the Carolina Hurricanes. Somebody brought up, I was just seeing it on Twitter, somebody brought up the fact that we have future considerations with Carolina, yet that didn't seem to yield us anything extra with them in this trade.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, it was Dylan Wells as a part of that package. Spanky, I hope they fix the goaltending problem soon. Simon wants to know when Rickard Rakell is coming. Said he's Josh's boy. Rakell is my boy. I have laid claim to Rickard Rakell.
I like Rickard Rakell too. Sam Reinhart was more my boy.
You know what? That was a low price Florida had to pay for Sam.
I know. Devin Levi, and what was it, a first round or second round pick?
First rounder that's top 10 protected.
Still,
like,
though, yeah.
I would have given up Konovalov in a first round pick for Sam Reinhart.
I would have given up.
The scenario I would have done, though, is if you didn't trade down and you stayed at 20, you could have drafted Wallstedt and then taken Konovalov in next year's first and flipped him for Reinhart, who was like 10th in goals last year in the NHL. But that's kind of a whole nother conversation if you have it.
Everybody's kind of forgotten about that one because of free agency.
Yeah, no kidding. We did not get into that too much. Quickly here, before we wrap up again, another episode of State of the Nation will come later today when we'll recap this fully. Oilers Nation Radio, that'll drop later this afternoon. The biggest names still available on Frank's free agent list. Number 1 is Dougie Hamilton, but he's apparently going to New Jersey. Philip Grubauer is sitting there. So is Linus Ullmark. So a couple goalies, maybe something to keep an eye on if the Oilers can move on from Koskinen. Philippe Deneau here in the LA Kings, potentially in the mix there. Ryan Suter, although he's likely going to Dallas. And a guy like Brandon Saad would be interesting as well if the Oilers decide to just say screw it and add another winger. But those are sort of the big names still on the board. Our boy Frank Saravalli is also on Sportsnet's coverage right now, and you're going to want to keep it locked on Daily Face-Off and on our social media channels for all the breaking signings. Dan, Josh, you guys enjoy the rest of the frenzy here. To everyone who tuned in, played along on Twitch, thank you for doing that. We'll be back a little bit later with more content, but you guys enjoy the day.
Yep, you too.
Say hi to the whippersnipper for me.
Yeah, he's been going here, so that's kind of why I got to dip off. So see ya.